Imagine you only have a balcony or a small garden, maybe 10 or 15 square meters, and yet you harvest more fresh vegetables than your neighbor with a plot 3 times as large. It sounds impossible, but it isn't. There's a method that has worked for centuries, but has been forgotten. A method that doesn't mean more work, but less. That doesn't need more water, but less. And that doubles, triples, or even quadruples your harvest on half the space. If you turn off this video now, you'll never learn why most hobby gardeners waste their entire potential. Why they work more, water more, fertilize more, and still harvest less. But if you stay, I'll show you step by step how one single structural change can turn your entire gardening concept upside down. The truth is brutally simple. 90% of all hobby gardeners waste their space. They create beds that think horizontally. They plant in exhausted soil. They fight against slugs, weeds, and bad weather. And in the end, they harvest just enough for 2 salads and 3 tomatoes. It doesn't have to be that way. There is a better way, a way that has proven time and again in the history of agriculture that intelligent design is more important than a large area. A way based on principles that have worked in nature for millions of years. Before we dive deeper, an important note. If your independence is important to you, if you want to understand how real food production works, if you value what ends up on your plate, then subscribe to this channel now. Leave a like so this knowledge reaches more people, and definitely stay until the end. Because there, I'll show you specifically how you can use this method even in the depths of winter when everyone else has long since stopped harvesting. This isn't theoretical knowledge. These are practical instructions that work. We live in a time when very few people still know where their food comes from. Supermarkets are full, shelves are groaning under the weight of imported food. Tomatoes from Spain, cucumbers from the Netherlands, lettuce from Italy. Everything looks perfect. Everything is always available. But what happens if these supply chains collapse for just 1 week? What happens if energy prices continue to rise and transport becomes unaffordable? What happens if food prices double or triple? What happens if you suddenly can't get what you're used to? Our grandparents still had vegetable gardens. Not as a hobby, not out of passion, but out of necessity. They knew that independence begins when you can produce for yourself, when you're not dependent on supply chains, on supermarkets, on other people. They knew that a well-run garden means security, real security. Not the illusion of security that a full fridge gives today, but the deep certainty that tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, next month, you'll still be able to eat, no matter what happens. But they also had advantages that we no longer have today. They had large plots, they had time, they had experience passed down through generations. They knew when to sow, when to harvest, how to care for the soil. Today, most of us don't have that anymore. We live in cities, in apartments, on cramped lots. We have jobs, obligations, little time. We don't have the space our grandparents had. And that's exactly why we need smarter solutions today than our grandparents did. Solutions that deliver maximum yields in a small space. Solutions that bring more yield with less effort. Solutions that don't work against nature, but with it. And that's exactly where the raised bed comes into play. But not just any raised bed. Not those decorative wooden boxes you buy at the hardware store and fill with cheap soil. Not those shallow, ill-conceived constructions that fall apart after 2 years, but a properly designed, scientifically thought out, biologically optimized system. A system that combines all the principles of permaculture, regenerative agriculture, and traditional horticultural art. A system that works, not in theory, but in practice, year after year, harvest after harvest. Let's start with the first fundamental principle. Vertical cultivation instead of horizontal waste. Most people think in terms of area. They say, I have 10 meter of garden, so I can plant 10 meter. That's one-dimensional thinking. That's waste. It's like building a skyscraper and only using the ground floor. Wrong. Fundamentally wrong. You don't just have 10 meter of ground area. You have 10 meter of ground area and unlimited airspace above it. You have height, you have volume, you have 3-dimensional space. And it's exactly this third dimension that very few gardeners use. A classic flat bed lies directly on the ground. It's maybe 20 or 30 centimeters deep. If you plant lettuce there, the roots use maybe 15 centimeters of soil depth. The rest underneath remains unused. Why? Because the soil is compacted. Because it's cold, especially in spring and autumn. Because it's poorly aerated. Because soil life isn't active there. Because no decomposition processes take place that generate heat. Your plants grow slowly, they stay small, they produce little. A raised bed, on the other hand, uses 80, sometimes 100, sometimes even 120 centimeters in height. And in this height, something decisive happens. Something magical, something that makes all the difference. You layer different materials on top of each other. Each layer has a function. Each layer contributes to the overall system. At the bottom come coarse branches and thick twigs. They create cavities, store water, and attract fungi. On top of that comes semi-decomposed organic material, leaves, grass clippings, straw. Above that comes mature compost, rich in nutrients and microorganisms. And at the very top comes high-quality garden soil, mixed with worm castings. This layering is not accidental. It is a replica of what happens in a healthy forest floor, and it produces something crucial: heat. Heat through decomposition, heat through microbial activity, heat that is constant day and night. This heat is the turbocharger for your plant growth. Your tomatoes ripen 3 weeks earlier than your neighbors. Your lettuce grows twice as fast. Your cucumbers produce longer. Your roots penetrate deeper because the soil is loose, warm, and nutrient-rich. Imagine you had to work. You have two options: a cold, damp, poorly ventilated cellar, or a warm, well-lit, perfectly climate-controlled office. In which room are you more productive? In which room do you feel better? In which room do you achieve more? The answer is obvious. Exactly. Your plants are no different. They are living beings. They react to their environment. They need warmth. They need air. They need structure. They need life around them. And the raised bed gives them exactly that. It creates optimal conditions from the beginning, from day one. This brings us to the second fundamental principle: activate soil life. Don't poison it. The industrial agriculture of the last 70 years has taught us something wrong. It has taught us that soil is just a substrate, a carrier for chemical fertilizer, a passive medium into which you stick seeds and pour chemicals. That is fundamentally wrong. That is a lie that has earned billions while simultaneously destroying soils worldwide. Soil is not a substrate. Soil is a living, breathing, complex ecosystem. In a single teaspoon of healthy garden soil, there are more microorganisms than people on the entire earth. Let that sink in. A teaspoon. More life than 8 billion humans. These organisms are not decoration. They are not a nice side note. They are the heart of your garden. Without them, nothing grows. Without them, there is no agriculture. Without them, the planet dies. These organisms decompose organic material. They convert dead leaves, dead roots, dead insects into nutrients that your plants can absorb. They produce hormones that promote plant growth. They protect the roots from diseases by displacing pathogenic fungi and bacteria. They improve soil structure by forming crumbs that store water and air optimally. They are the invisible workers that keep your garden running. And the best part, they work for free 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year round. But this life is fragile. It dies if you use synthetic fertilizers. Synthetic fertilizer is like fast food for plants. Quick energy, but no substance. The plants grow, but the soil becomes impoverished. The microorganisms starve. The soil life collapses. You become dependent on fertilizer. Every year you need more. And the plants become weaker, more susceptible to diseases. It dies if you use pesticides. Pesticides don't just kill pests, they kill everything. The good insects, the beneficial fungi, the hard-working bacteria. You destroy the entire ecosystem, and then you wonder why your garden no longer works. It dies if you compact the soil, if you walk on it, if you work it with heavy machinery, if you plow it up. Compaction destroys the soil structure. The air is squeezed out, the organisms suffocate, the system collapses. In a raised bed, you can build and protect this life from the start. You start with coarse branches and thick twigs in the lower area. Why? Because dead wood is a water reservoir. It soaks up like a sponge, and slowly releases moisture. And because deadwood attracts fungi, fungi are nature's recyclers. They decompose the wood and make the nutrients available. They form networks that connect with plant roots. These connections are called mycorrhizae. The fungi provide the plants with water and nutrients from areas that their roots cannot reach. The plants provide the fungi with sugar from photosynthesis, a perfect symbiosis, a deal from which both benefit. Above that comes semi-decomposed compost. It's not finished, it's still working. And that's exactly what you want. It provides nutrients while it decomposes. It generates heat through decomposition. It activates bacteria that fix nitrogen. It attracts earthworms that mix and aerate the soil. On top of that comes mature garden soil, ideally mixed with worm castings. Worm castings are gold, black gold. It's the most nutrient-rich material you can bring into your garden. Earthworms eat organic material and excrete it as perfectly processed fertilizer. This fertilizer is immediately available to plants. It improves soil structure, it stores water, it is the turbocharger for every bed. At the very top comes a thin layer of mulch, straw, grass clippings, shredded leaves. This layer protects the soil from drying out. It prevents weed seeds from germinating, it provides habitat for soil organisms, and it decomposes slowly and feeds the system continuously. Very few people remember this, but it is the most important sentence in this entire video. You don't feed the plant, you feed the soil, and the soil feeds the plant. Once you understand that, you never need to buy fertilizer again. Never again pesticides. Never again expensive soil improvers. You have created a self-sustaining system. A system that gets better every year, not worse. A system that builds up instead of breaking down. Third principle, optimize water balance through structure and capillary action. Water is the most valuable resource in the garden. Without water, no life. Without water, no harvest. Without water, everything dies. And most gardeners waste this precious resource in a criminal way. They water too much, they water too often, they water at the wrong time, they water superficially. The water seeps into the subsoil where there are no roots. It evaporates in the midday heat. It runs off because the soil cannot absorb it. It's waste, pure waste. In a raised bed, something completely different happens. Through the well-thought-out layering, a natural, self-regulating water storage system is created. The coarse wood in the bottom layer is the main storage. Wood can store up to 300% of its own weight in water. It soaks itself full during rain or irrigation, and then slowly releases the water upwards over weeks. It's like a reservoir, an underground tank that is always full. The compost above acts like a wick, like a capillary system. It draws the water from the wood up to the roots. At the same time, it stores water itself because organic material acts like a sponge. The soil above distributes the water horizontally to all roots evenly. It holds it in the pores between the soil crumbs. It releases it to the plants in a controlled manner, and the mulch at the very top is the protective layer. It prevents water from evaporating. On hot summer days, an unmulched bed can lose up to 10 liters of water per square meter through evaporation. 10 liters, that's a whole watering can, simply gone, wasted. A mulched bed loses maybe 1 liter. The rest stays in the system. The result, you water less often, much less often. Instead of every day, maybe twice a week. Instead of 10 liters per square meter, maybe 3 liters. But when you water, the water lasts longer. It is continuously available to the plants. Your plants are never stressed. They always have access to moisture, even on hot days. And that means consistent growth. No stress symptoms, no cracks in the tomatoes, no bitter lettuce, no wilted cucumbers. Additionally, you can build a raised bed so that it handles water intelligently. You can construct it with a slight slope, about a 2 to 3% grade. Excess water that the system cannot absorb then flows in a controlled manner in one direction, but it's not lost. You catch it in a bucket, in a rain barrel, in a collection basin, and you use it again. That is circular economy. That is water efficiency. That is how intelligent systems work. You can even go further. You can integrate an olla system. Ollas are clay pots with porous walls. You bury them in the raised bed, fill them with water and seal them. The water seeps slowly through the walls directly into the root zone. The plants take what they need. Not a drop is wasted. You fill the olives maybe once a week. That's it. No more daily watering. Or you install a simple drip hose system, a hose with tiny holes laid directly on the soil under the mulch, connected to a timer. 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. The water goes directly to the roots. No evaporation, no waste, fully automatic. You can go on vacation and your raised bed takes care of itself. That's the beauty of a well-thought-out system. It works for you. You don't have to invest time every day. You don't have to constantly check. The system regulates itself, and that gives you freedom. Freedom to live your life, freedom to travel, freedom to do other things. And yet your garden keeps going, keeps growing, keeps producing. Fourth principle, create space through vertical trellises and multi-layered planting. Now it gets really interesting. Now we come to the core of what actually doubles your harvest. Most gardeners plant only one level in a raised bed. They think two-dimensionally. They place lettuce, kohlrabi, radishes, all next to each other at the same height. That is a waste of space. It's like building a house and only using one floor, even though you have materials and space for 3 floors. But they forget, you can also plant upwards. You can attach trellises to the raised bed. You can build espaliers. You can set up poles. And that's where the climbing plants grow. Tomatoes, pole beans, peas, cucumbers, zucchini, pumpkins. These plants don't take up space on the ground. They grow upwards into the airspace that would be unused anyway. A trellis 2 meter high doubles your cultivation area instantly and without a single additional square centimeter of ground area. At the same time, you can place shade-loving plants on the ground under the vines. Lettuces, spinach, arugula, chard, Asian, salads. These plants have a special quality. They don't like full sun. With too much sun, they become bitter. They bolt to seed. They burn. But in the shade of the tomato plants, in the partial shade of the bean poles, that's where they feel comfortable. They grow slower, yes, but they grow more stably. They stay tender. They taste better. And above all, they use space that would otherwise be empty. That is the crucial point. You don't just use area, you use volume, you use space. Space is three-dimensional. 1 square meter of ground area with 2 meters of height is 2 cubic meters of space. And in these 2 cubic meters, you can produce several harvests simultaneously. At the top, the fruits, tomatoes, cucumbers, beans. In the middle, the leaves, lettuce, spinach. At the bottom, the roots, radishes, carrots. Imagine a skyscraper. Would you build a 20-story building and only use the ground floor? Would you leave the other 19 floors empty? Of course not. That would be absurd. That would be waste. But that's exactly what 90% of all gardeners do with their soil. They only use the top layer. They ignore height. They ignore potential. A properly planted raised bed can support 4, 5, sometimes 6 different plant species at the same time. And not in a jumble, but organized. Each plant has its place. Each plant has its function. Each plant contributes to the overall system. Fifth principle, crop rotation and mixed culture as natural plant protection. Monocultures are the death of any garden. That's not an exaggeration. That's biology. If you only plant tomatoes, you attract tomato diseases. The spores overwinter in the soil. Next year, they are still there, stronger, more aggressive. Your plants get sick. You have to spray. You have to replace the soil. You lose. If you only plant cabbage, the cabbage white butterflies come. They lay their eggs. The caterpillars eat your plants bare. You can't stop them. There are too many, you lose again. But in the raised bed, you can create mixed cultures. You can combine. You can use nature instead of working against it. Plants communicate. This isn't esotericism. It's scientifically proven. They communicate via scents. They communicate via root exudates. They warn each other about pests. They share nutrients. They help each other. You plant tomatoes next to basil. Why? Because basil produces essential oils that keep the whitefly away. The whitefly is the main pest for tomatoes, but it doesn't come if basil is nearby. The scent confuses them. They don't find the tomatoes. Problem solved. Without chemicals, without effort. You plant carrots next to onions. The onion fly is guided by the smell of onions, but it doesn't find them among the carrots. The carrot fly is guided by the smell of carrots, but it doesn't find the carrots among the onions. Both pests are confused. Both stay away. Both crops stay healthy. You plant marigolds as a border plant. Marigolds look nice, yes, but that's not the reason you plant them. You plant them because their roots secrete substances that kill nematodes. Nematodes are microscopic worms that attack plant roots. They can destroy entire harvests, but where marigolds grow, they die. That is natural plant protection. That is how intelligent gardening works. Furthermore, in a raised bed, you can plan crop rotation more easily than in a normal bed. You divide it into zones. Each zone is 30-40 centimeter wide. Each zone gets a different plant family every year. This year, nightshades, tomatoes, peppers. Next year, crucifers, cabbage, radishes. The year after that, legumes, beans, peas. Then start over. Why is this important? Because different plant families need different nutrients and have different diseases. Tomatoes are heavy feeders. They need a lot of nitrogen. They take a lot from the soil. Beans are light feeders. They need little, but they give something back. They fix nitrogen from the air and store it in the soil. If you plant beans after tomatoes, the soil regenerates. It recovers. It builds fertility. And as for the diseases, tomato diseases don't affect beans. Cabbage diseases don't affect tomatoes. If you rotate, you break the disease cycle. The pathogens find no host. They die off. Your bed stays healthy year after year without chemicals, without problems. Sixth principle, season extension through heat storage and covering. This is where the raised bed becomes a secret weapon. This is where the true value of this method shows. While your neighbors harvest the last tomato in October and then have to wait until May, you're still harvesting lettuce in November, spinach in December, Asian salads in January, and in February, you're already sowing again, while others are still sitting by the stove scrolling through catalogs. Why is this possible? Because the raised bed is a heat storage unit, a thermal buffer. The decomposition inside generates constant heat. Not a lot, maybe 5 degrees, maybe 10 degrees. But that's enough. That's the difference between frost and frost-free, between death and life, between stagnation and growth. The elevated position protects against ground frost. Frost comes from the ground. Cold air is heavy. It sinks down. It collects on the ground. A flat bed lies directly in this cold zone. A raised bed lies 30, 40, 50 centimeters above it in the warmer air layer. That doesn't sound like much, but it makes all the difference. It can mean your plants grow for 3 weeks longer, 3 weeks more harvest, 3 weeks more independence. And if you also attach a simple cover, you create a microclimate, a mini greenhouse. You don't need anything complicated, a simple wooden frame, a few old windows, or a transparent film stretched over hoops. That's it. Heat collects under this cover. The sun heats it up during the day. The decomposition heats it from below. At night, the cover keeps the heat in. The result, 10 to 15 degrees more than outside. Specifically, this means you can already sow radishes in February, set lettuce in March, plant kohlrabi in April, while others are still waiting, while nothing is happening for others. You harvest your first radishes in April, your first lettuce in early May. You are 6 weeks ahead, and in the autumn you keep harvesting when everyone else has long since finished. Your last tomatoes in November, your last cucumbers at the end of October, and then come the winter crops, lamb's lettuce, spinach, winter purslane, Asian salads, kale. These plants are tough. They tolerate frost. They grow slowly, but they grow. Under the cover in the raised bed with the heat from below, they survive. 10 degrees and 15 degrees. They freeze, yes, but they don't die. And as soon as the sun shines again, they thaw out and you can harvest. Imagine it's January, snow outside, for 5 degrees, and you go to your raised bed. You lift the cover, you cut fresh lamb's lettuce, fresh leaves, green, crisp, full of vitamins, while others buy wilted lettuce from the supermarket that has traveled 1,000 kilometers and is shrink-wrapped in plastic. This is not a fantasy, it's reality. I've done it, I've harvested in January, and you can do it too. That means 10 months of harvest time instead of 6. That means real food security. That means independence. Not just in summer when everything grows anyway, but also in winter when it really counts. Stay tuned because now we're coming to the practical implementation. Now I'll show you step by step how you combine all these principles into a single raised bed. Before we get to the construction, one important point. This knowledge is not new, it's not complicated, but it isn't taught. It isn't taught in schools, it isn't explained in the media, it isn't advertised by industry. Why not? Because it makes you independent. Because you don't need products anymore. No fertilizer, no pesticides, no expensive seeds every year. You only need knowledge, and knowledge can't be sold once it's shared. The gardening industry lives off you staying dependent, buying new products every year, thinking that gardening is complicated, thinking you need specialized products. That is wrong. Gardening is simple. Nature does most of the work. You just have to create the right conditions and then it happens by itself. Once you understand that, you know why this video is important. Not just for your garden, not just for your health, but for your freedom, for your independence, for your future. Now for the practice, how do you build a raised bed that combines all these principles? It starts with the right size. An optimal raised bed is 120 centimeters wide. Why exactly 120? Because that's the reach of your arms. You can reach 60 centimeters from one side and 60 centimeters from the other side. That makes 120 together. This means you can reach every part of the bed without ever having to step inside. And that is crucial because as soon as you step on the soil, you compact it. You destroy the soil structure, you squeeze out the air, the microorganisms die. The system collapses. The length is flexible. 200 centimeters is good for small gardens, 300 centimeters for medium ones, 400 centimeters or more if you have space, but not longer than 6 centimeters. Otherwise, the path around the bed becomes too long. You walk too much. It gets annoying. It demotivates. Keep it practical. The height is critical. 80 centimeters is the minimum. 90 or 100 centimeters is better. Why so high? First, ergonomics. At a working height of 80 to 100 centimeters, you don't have to bend over. Your back stays straight. You can work for hours without pain. This is important, especially as you get older. Second, depth for layering. Only at 80 centimeters or more can you build up a proper layering. 20 centimeters in coarse wood, 20 centimeters compost, 20 centimeters soil, 20 centimeters in reserve at the top. Third, heat storage. The more mass, the more heat is stored. A shallow raised bed of 40 centimeters stores hardly any heat. A deep one of 100 centimeters stores enough for weeks. For construction, you need materials. And here it gets interesting. You don't need expensive wood from the hardware store. You don't need larch boards for $20 per square meter. That's waste. That's marketing. You can use reclaimed wood, old pallets, boards from demolished barns or fences, construction timber from demolition companies. Often you can get this for free or for a few euros. Pallets are particularly good. They are stable, they are free or very cheap, and they are already the right size. Only one thing is important. Don't treat the wood on the inside with chemicals. No wood preservative, no impregnating agent, nothing. The wood is in direct contact with the soil, with the compost, with the roots. Everything you paint on the wood ends up in your vegetables, in your body. Do you want that? No, so leave it. But the wood will rot, you'll say. Yes, that's correct. Wood rots, but that's not a problem. It's actually good because rotting wood releases nutrients, because it attracts fungi, because it becomes part of the system. A good raised bed made of untreated wood lasts 5 to 7 years. Then you replace the boards. That is more sustainable than plastic tubs that never rot, that break eventually and end up as trash. If you still want longevity, treat the wood only on the outside with a natural wood stain, linseed oil for example, or a water-based stain only on the outside. Inside, everything stays raw. The construction begins on the ground. Choose a sunny spot. At least 6 hours of direct sun per day. More is better. Without sun, no growth. Without sun, no harvest. Align the bed to the south if possible. This way, even low-growing plants get enough light. Line the bottom with a coarse wire mesh. Mesh size about 1 centimeter. This keeps voles away. Voles are every gardener's nightmare. They come from below. They eat roots. They can ruin an entire bed in one night. The wire mesh stops them. It costs $20 per raised bed. It saves you hundreds of euros in lost harvests. Then you build the walls. If you use pallets, stand them upright, screw them together at the corners. Reinforce them with posts that you drive into the ground. The construction must be stable. A filled raised bed weighs several hundred kilograms. If the walls give way, everything collapses. If you use boards, build a frame. Posts at the corners, at least 10x 10 cm thick. Boards overlapping and screwed in between. On the inside, you can attach a liner to further protect the wood. But again, use only natural materials. No PVC pond liner, it releases plasticizers. Use dimpled membrane or simply nothing at all. Now comes the filling. This is the magical moment. This is where you build the system that will work for you for years to come. Bottom layer, coarse material, branches, twigs, thick logs, roots, anything that takes a long time to decompose. This layer should be 20 to 30 centimeters high. Pack the material tightly but not too tightly. Cavities must still remain. These cavities store air and water. On top of that comes a layer of semi-decomposed material, old leaves that have been in the woods for a year, grass clippings from last summer, straw, hay, garden waste, anything that has already begun to decompose but isn't finished yet, also 20 to 30 cm. This layer is the motor of the raised bed. This is where the most intense decomposition takes place. This is where the most heat is generated. This is where microbial life explodes. Above that comes mature compost. If you have your own compost pile, perfect. Take the finished compost from the bottom area. Black, crumbly, smells like forest floor. If you don't have your own, buy it. Composting facilities often sell compost very cheaply, $10 to $20 per cubic meter. For a raised bed, you need about half a cubic meter, so $5 to $10. This is the best investment you can make. This layer should be 15 to 20 centimeter thick. At the very top comes the planting layer, a mixture of good garden soil and worm castings. Ratio 2.1, 2 parts soil, 1 part worm castings. If you don't have worm castings, just take good soil. But worm castings are better, much better. This layer should be 20 to 30 centimeter thick. This is where the roots go. This is where growth takes place. This is where it's decided whether your plants become strong or weak. Finally, a thin mulch layer, 3 to 5 cm. Straw is ideal. It's bright, reflects light, keeps the soil cool in summer. Grass clippings also work, but only if dried. Fresh grass clippings rot and stink. Shredded leaves are also good, or wood chips, but only as the bottom mulch layer. They take a long time to decompose and strip nitrogen from the soil. This layering is the heart of the system. It is the result of centuries of experience. It is what works, not in theory, in practice, year after year, for thousands of gardeners, on all continents, in all climate zones. Now for the planting. This is where the harvest begins. This is where it shows if you've understood it. Start in early spring as soon as the raised bed is filled. March, April, depending on the region. First crop, radishes and lettuce. Why? Because they grow quickly, because they need little heat, because they take advantage of the first warm days. Plant radishes at a distance of 5 cm. They are ready to harvest in 4 weeks. Plant lettuce at a distance of 25 cm. It's ready to harvest in 6 to 8 weeks. In between, you can sow spinach, densely as a row. You harvest it young as baby spinach. Tender, delicious, full of vitamins. At the same time, on the long sides of the raised bed, install trellises. Poles made of wood or bamboo 2 meter high. Between the poles, stretch wire or string horizontally every 30 cm. That is your climbing frame. There you place peas. They climb early, need little heat, and fix nitrogen in the soil. Perfect for the start of spring. At the end of April or beginning of May, when the lettuce is half harvested, you set the main crops: tomatoes, cucumbers, pole beans. These are the powerhouses that turn your raised bed into a production miracle. Tomatoes need warmth. Don't plant them too early, better mid-May than mid-April. 1 plant per 50 cm of bed length. They get big, very big. Tie them to the trellises. Cucumbers the same way. One plant per 60 centimeters. You can set pole beans densely, one plant every 20 centimeters. And now comes the trick. Between the tomatoes on the ground, you plant lettuce or radishes or spinach again. The tomatoes are still small. They don't provide shade yet. The lettuce has space, it grows, and by the time the tomatoes are large, the lettuce is harvested. You use every square centimeter, no waste. In July, your raised bed explodes. The tomatoes are hanging full, the cucumbers are sprawling, the beans are producing. You harvest 1 kilo, 2 kilo, or more daily from a single raised bed. And under the vines in the partial shade, lettuce is still growing. Slower now, but steadily. You always have fresh greens. August, September, the main harvest continues. But now you're already thinking about autumn. As soon as a space becomes free, you sow more. Lamb's lettuce, winter purslane, spinach, arugula. These plants don't need heat. They grow even at 10 degrees. They survive light frost. They are your winter supply. End of September, October. The tomatoes are finished. You remove the plants. Now the autumn crops have full access to light. They put on weight. In November, you continue to harvest. In December, too, if you have a cover. So works a raised bed all year round. It's never empty. It produces nonstop from March to December. 10 months. 10 months of fresh vegetables from a single raised bed. That is reality. That is possible. That is what happens when you understand the principles. Let's talk about irrigation. You can keep it simple. Watering can, water in the morning, directly at the roots. That works, but it takes time. 10 minutes every day. That adds up. A system is smarter. Option 1. Drip hose. A simple hose with small holes, laid under the mulch. Connected to the faucet with a timer. Program it for 20 minutes at 6 a.m. That's enough. The water goes directly to the roots. No evaporation, no waste. You can go away for 2 weeks. The system keeps running. Costs about $30 per raised bed. Saves hundreds of hours of work. Option 2. Olas. Clay pots with porous walls. Bury them in the raised bed. Only the neck sticks out. Fill them with water. The water seeps slowly through the walls. The roots take what they need. You refill once a week. That's it. You can buy olas or make them yourself. Glue 2 clay pots together with silicone. Done. Costs $10 each. You need 2 or 3 per raised bed. Option 3. Self-watering via water reservoir. In this system, you build a water tank under the raised bed with a water-permeable partition above it. The water rises through capillary action. The plants take care of themselves. You fill the reservoir once a week. More complicated to build, but extremely effective. Ideal if you're away often. Which system you choose depends on your situation. Little time. Drip hose. Away often. Olas or reservoir. Like being in the garden. Watering can. Everything works. What's important is water correctly. Better rare and deep than often and superficial. Better once a week with 20 liters than every day with 2 liters. Deep watering encourages deep roots. Superficial watering promotes shallow roots, and shallow roots mean vulnerable plants. Now it gets important. What most people don't know is that the raised bed sinks in the first year, significantly by 20, sometimes 30 centimeters. This is not a mistake. This is not a problem. It's intentional. The material decomposes, it gets compacted, it turns into humus. The volume decreases, but that's good because now the most valuable soil you can have is being created. Mature, living humus. And you simply top it up. Every year in autumn after the last harvest, you add new material. A 10 centimeter layer of compost, a 10 centimeter layer of soil, and 5 centimeter of mulch. By the next spring, the raised bed is full again and better than the year before. Richer, livelier, more fertile. That's the beauty of it. A raised bed doesn't get worse over time. It gets better. Better every year until about the 5th year. Then you have reached optimal soil. After that, it remains stable. You only have to top up what you remove. Let's talk about costs, because that's important to many. A professional raised bed from a garden center costs between $200 and $600 without soil, without compost, just the wooden frame. On top of that, $100 to $200 for filling, Total cost $300 to $800. And often these raised beds are small, shallow, made of cheap wood. After 3 years, they collapse. You can build it yourself for a fraction, reclaim wood or pallets, free up to $20. Screws and wire mesh, $20. Coarse material for the bottom layer free from your own garden or the woods. Compost, $20 from the composting facility. Soil, $30. Worm castings, $20. Mulch free or $10. Total costs $50 to $130, and you have a raised bed that is just as good as a professional one, often even better because you build it according to your needs. This investment pays for itself in the very first year. A 2x RONF raised bed, properly planted, produces vegetables worth $300 to $600 per year. In the second year, even more, because the soil has improved, and it produces for 10 years if you maintain it. That is a return on investment of several thousand%. No stock, no real estate, nothing beats that. But money isn't the only value, maybe not even the most important. The true value lies in the quality. The vegetables from your raised bed taste different, fundamentally different. They are fresher, they have more nutrients, they have no pesticides, no herbicides, no fungicides. They haven't been pumped up with synthetic fertilizer. They haven't traveled hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers. They weren't harvested unripe. They weren't artificially ripened with gas. They aren't shrink-wrapped in plastic. They haven't been sitting in a cold storage warehouse for days. They are real. They are alive. They are full of energy. And you feel that. You taste that. You notice that in your health. Your children taste it. Suddenly they eat vegetables they previously refused. Why? Because they taste good. Because their bodies recognize this is food, real food, not those tasteless, watery things from the supermarket. That is the difference between living and surviving, between nourishment and filler. Let's get to a crucial point. Why doesn't everyone do this? Why doesn't everyone have a raised bed? If it's so simple, if it brings so much, why isn't everyone doing it? The answer is uncomfortable, because it's work. Not a lot of work, but work. Because it takes planning, because it means you have to deal with nature, with seasons, with soil, with life. And most people don't want that. They want convenience, they want the supermarket, they want to order with one click and have it delivered the next day. They don't want to think about what they eat, about its origin, about its quality, about the consequences. But times are changing faster than many think. Prices are rising massively. Vegetables that cost $1 2 years ago now cost $2. Quality is declining. What is sold as a tomato in the supermarket only shares the shape with a real tomato. Dependence is growing. We are dependent on supply chains that are more fragile than ever, on global markets that can collapse at any time, on political decisions over which we have no influence. And suddenly the raised bed becomes a necessity, an insurance, a safeguard against an uncertain future, freedom in a world of increasing control. I'm not saying you have to become self-sufficient. I'm not saying you should produce all your own food. That's unrealistic for most people. But I say, fangen, build a raised bed, plant your first lettuce, harvest your first radishes, set your first tomatoes and feel what that does to you. It changes your consciousness. You suddenly see food differently. You understand how much work goes into a single tomato, how much time, how much attention. You develop respect for nature, for the soil, for the work of farmers. You waste less, you value more, and at the same time it gives you self-confidence. Because suddenly you know, I can do this. I can provide for myself, at least partially. I am not completely helpless. I am not completely dependent. That is the deeper level. That is what it's really about. Not just about tomatoes and lettuce, but about self-efficacy, about control over your own life, about independence in a world that wants to keep you dependent. The world is becoming more uncertain. Crises are piling up. Climate crisis, energy crisis, economic crisis, political instability. No one knows what will happen in 5 years. No one knows what the supply will look like. No one knows if the systems that work today will still work tomorrow. But you can prepare, not with fear, not with panic, but with knowledge, with skills, with practical things that work. with a raised bed that produces while others only consume, with the ability to generate food while others can only buy. That is the truth that no one says out loud. Whoever can produce food has power, real power. Not the illusory power of money or status, but the fundamental power over your own survival, power over your own health, power over your own future, power over the lives of your own children. And this power begins with a simple wooden box, filled with layers of organic material from which life grows. It's not complicated, it's not expensive, it doesn't need special skills, but it's powerful, incredibly powerful, and it has worked for centuries on all continents for anyone who is willing to try it. If you've listened this far, then you now know more about raised beds than 99% of people. You know how to double, triple your harvest. You know how to achieve high yields in a small space. You know how to harvest all year round. You know how to become more independent. You have the knowledge. You have the instructions. You have everything you need. Now it's up to you, only up to you. You can forget this knowledge. You can keep going as before. You can sit back and hope that everything goes well. That is one option. Or you can act. You can get wood tomorrow, start building the day after tomorrow, fill your first raised bed in a week, set the first seeds in 2 weeks, bring in the first harvest in 3 months, have a functioning system in 1 year that provides for you. The decision is yours, only yours. No one can take it from you. But one thing is certain. The time when we didn't have to think about food is over. Finally over. The time when everything was self-evident is history. The time when supermarkets were always full, when prices were low, when no one had to worry, is over. And the time when people who prepare were mocked, when self-sufficiency was considered crazy, is also over. Today, those who are wise are those who are prepared, who think ahead, who have skills, who can produce, who are independent. Not completely. That's unrealistic, but partially. And partially is better than not at all. 20% self-sufficiency is better than 0. 50% is better than 20. Every step counts. Every tomato counts. Every lettuce counts. If this video helped you, if you learned something, if you understood why this is important, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel right now. Leave a like so this video reaches more people, so this knowledge spreads, so more people become independent. Share the video with someone who needs it, with someone who has a garden, with someone who is worried, with someone who wants to understand how they can prepare. And write in the comments, I want to hear from you. Do you already have a raised bed? Does it work? What experiences have you had? Or are you just planning to build one? What's still holding you back? Or do you have questions about materials, planting, or problems? Ask them. I read every single comment, every one. And I answer every serious question because this channel is not a one-way street, not a monologue. It is a community of people who have understood that independence is the most valuable asset we have. A community of people who are ready to act, who are ready to learn, who are ready to take responsibility for their own lives. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for informing yourself instead of just consuming. Thank you for thinking instead of just accepting. Thank you for being ready to act. That's what distinguishes you from the crowd. That's what makes you someone who is prepared, someone who has a future, no matter what comes. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay independent, stay critical, and start planting. If this story has changed your view on the possibilities of your garden, then subscribe to our channel now. We dig up the knowledge that others try to bury. Sow the seeds for your own future. The next treasure of knowledge will be revealed soon.